Hey everybody, Raheem here, and today we're talking about the Safe Banking Act, sales in Colorado, and more. Welcome to the Wednesday, September 15th edition of MaryJane Markets, a show covering the developing news of the North American cannabis sector every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and analyzing a few of its operators, namely Cresco Labs, Curaleaf, Green Thumb Industries, and Trulieve. Apologies if this episode comes out late. It's a Wednesday night as I'm recording this, so I might have to post this on Thursday. First, let's take a quick look at the market. A very strong day for the market on the unexpected news of the Safe Banking Act, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But as you can see here on the screen, the index MSOS is up over 5%. Cresco Labs and Green Thumb Industries today up over 6%. And Curaleaf and Trulieve also up close to 5%. That's against a strong day for the macro environment as well, with both the S&P and the NASDAQ up nearly 1%. Let's talk about what's driving that. Some unexpected developments on the Safe Banking Act circulating today. This is coming out of the U.S. House of Representatives, where some Congress members are attempting to attach amendments to a defense bill, the National Defense Authorization Act, which is referred to as its initials, NDAA. The bill's purpose is to authorize fiscal year 2021 appropriations and set policies for the Department of Defense as well as some other programs. Because of its importance and that it's considered a must-pass bill, there are a whole bunch of proposed amendments that Congress members want to tack on. As you can see here, a whole lot of them. Thankfully, Kyle Yeager of Marijuana Moment here provides an overview of some of those amendments that are relevant to our community. Thank you, Kyle. I think the most relevant to us as investors is the Safe Banking Act. So Colorado Congressman Ed Perlmutter is attempting to get this added. Really quickly for listeners that might be new to the sector and don't know what this act is, a very broad summary would be that the Safe Banking Act protects a legitimate cannabis-related business and any institutions that provide banking services to them from being penalized by a federal banking regulator. So this isn't necessarily a checking account. There are banks and credit unions out there that work with these companies for that type of banking. But this would lead to more access to the capital markets, more institutional money taking stakes in these companies, things like that. Some of the effects of which unlock value in cannabis operators, hence the rally in prices today. Turning back to the topic at hand, if you were paying attention to the words I was using, you picked up on that this is far from actually passing. What's happened so far is just that this amendment to the bill has been proposed. Yesterday was the deadline to submit these proposals. So not only has this amendment not cleared the House yet, the proposal for the amendment hasn't even cleared the committee that would allow it to move forward to a full vote on the floor and then be attached to the bill. From there, it of course has to go to the Senate and pass there. And this is just me reading the field here. The Senate is where a more comprehensive bill, the CAOA, was proposed by Senators Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, and others, some of whom have been very vocal about not passing a banking legislation alone without some of those other components like social equity at the same time. And they have a strong preference to pass that over just the banking components. So to me, this seems like a very tall order to clear. There are several fences to clear before we're close to safe banking becoming law. But given the amount of press and attention this has been getting, I thought I would clear this up. It's yet another reminder to us as investors how much of an influence federal legislation can have on this sector. Some people see this as a negative, where the fate of your investment is in the hands of politicians. And others see this as a positive, where it could be a value unlock someday, but we all have to live with the reality that that influence does exist. There are more cannabis-related amendments to this bill. So if you're interested in some of these that are on the screen, be sure to check out this article by Kyle Yeager of Marijuana Moment. Next up is an update on sales in Colorado. This month they released sales data for July on their Department of Revenue website. So a little slow on reporting, but no surprise here. They're having another great month. Colorado is one of the more mature recreational use markets, with rec going legal back in 2012 and medicinal all the way back in 2000. And they've been providing this really useful data for a while now. So going over this page really quickly, hopefully you're able to read this on your screen. But so far, for the calendar year 2021, they've sold over $1.3 billion in cannabis product. Last year, for all of 2020, they sold around $2.2 billion worth. And they're probably on pace this year to hit maybe $2.4 billion, which would imply a 9% increase year over year. And as you can see from this chart, medicinal sales, that's the dotted line on the bottom here, have been flat over the last 6-7 years. And it's really been the recreational growth driving sales. Let's pop open this monthly report. So they break this down into medicinal and recreational, and then by county. Sorry, I can't fit that all on one screen, but for the month of July, they sold 35 million in medicinal products and another 168 almost million in recreational product, and that comes out to close to $203 million for the month. That compared with last month's $187 million, and like we saw before, most of that came from recreational sales. I always like to put these numbers in perspective with the bigger picture. So if we hop over to my market landscape spreadsheet, for new listeners, what I've done here is basically estimated the potential total size of the US cannabis market. And I did that using a bottom-up estimation. And then I distributed that across each state in proportion with that state's GDP. If you want more details into this, you can check out my very first episode. I think it's called Market Landscape. So Colorado here is the 13th largest market in the nation. I've estimated the total cannabis market. This is illicit and legal sales. I've estimated to be $2.7 billion. Last year's sales, and this is coming directly from that Colorado Department of Revenue website, were almost $2.2 billion, which means that the legal market in that state has captured close to 80% of the total sales, or that total market. So seeing a growth rate of 9% year over year isn't concerning in this market, especially when we see newer markets with 40 to 100% growth rates year over year. It's only natural as the market grows that the growth rate slows down a bit. All right, I think I've talked that to death. I have one more company-specific item I wanted to discuss today. So this is a filing that Trulieve filed with the SEC yesterday, Tuesday, September 14th. And this talks about a change to their share structure. So I wanted to talk about this. All right, here is the pertinent section. Feel free to pause and read this for yourself. Just a bit of background. Trulieve had 3 classes of shares: super voting shares, multiple voting shares, and subordinate voting shares. These subordinate voting shares are what's called common stock. That is the stock that you and I can buy on the CSE or over the counter. They say that back in March of this year, they converted all super voting shares to multiple voting shares, and now they have no more super voting shares outstanding. And then these multiple voting shares are identical to the subordinate voting shares, except in the way of voting power. So each subordinate voting share is entitled to 1 vote per share, and each multiple voting share is entitled to 100 votes per share. So the change here, the reason for the filing, is that they are now converting the multiple voting shares into subordinate voting shares on a 100-for-1 basis. So after this happens, there will only be one class of stock outstanding, and that is the common stock. And generally, this is considered a good thing. If you don't understand this concept of different classes of stock, or if you're newer to investing and don't understand what I'm talking about, just Google around for a bit. It's not too difficult to understand. There's definitely more types or classes of stock than just the few that we've discussed here. You'll hear of things like founders' shares, voting equity, non-voting equity. Generally, this type of structure exists so that insiders have more control over the company. So these multiple voting shares are not something that you or I would have been able to buy. These would be held by the board or key insiders. Now, what's happened here doesn't make Trulieve's voting structure any more equitable now. The same people that were holding these multiple voting shares now hold a proportionate amount of the common stock. So it's more like a 6-1 and half a dozen of the other situation. Anyway, this was a significant change to the capital structure, so I wanted to bring it to your attention and talk about it. When you're analyzing other companies, I do encourage you to take a look at how their capital structure is set up. This kind of stuff does matter, in my opinion. The more you know about a company, the better decisions you can make. A couple of other things happened this week that I wanted to bring to your attention. This morning, Charlie Bachtell, CEO of Cresco Labs, participated in a fire chat hosted by Cantor Fitzgerald. You can find the link to the webcast on Cresco Labs' IR page. Also, on the subreddit Weed Stocks, Dan Ernst, portfolio manager for the ETFs MSOS and YOLO, is participating in an AMA on Thursday. It's a pinned post, so all you have to do is get to the subreddit and it'll be right on the top. That is all for me today. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. And please share the podcast out with anyone that you think might be interested in this kind of fundamental analysis, or to places like Twitter and Reddit where fellow investors reside. I'm actually banned from posting in the Weed Stocks subreddit over a misunderstanding. If you want to reach out to me, my Twitter is @MJMarkets. If you feel like supporting the channel, my Patreon is patreon.com/MaryJane Markets. But really all I ask at this time is help in growing the audience. Thank you.